Hello, everyone. Welcome to Think Tank Television. I'm your host, Erin Johnson. And today we have with us one of our selectmen from Whitman, Justin Evans. Hi, Justin.
Hey, Erin. Nice to be back.
That's great to have you back. Today, I think we're going to discuss two topics. The first will be the CPA, which stands for?
It's the Community Preservation Act.
Okay, that's one. And then the second one we're going to talk about after is rank voting. So I think these are two things that people might not completely understand, but I think they're probably significant because, well, you can go ahead, talk about CPA and talk about what it is and how it will affect people. You know, in other words, is it some kind of a loan? Is that what you told me?
Not quite. CPA at our annual town meeting outside in July this year.
Mm-hmm.
The town voted to put a question on the ballot at the bottom of the presidential ballot, whether or not the town of Whitman should adopt the Community Preservation Act. What that functionally is a separate fund of, we voted to do a 1% surcharge on top of your annual property tax with some exemptions. And that money would be set aside for only community preservation related purposes. In with that, the state will match a certain dollar amount. Over the last 5 years, it's averaged about 20%. Last year, it was close to 24%. Of all the money that we raise, we will get additional state money.
Yeah, that was my question essentially. Is who's going to pay it back? So you're going to tax us 1%, and the state will pay the rest.
So it's 1% of your taxes. It's not an additional 1% on top.
Oh, okay. And so what kind of things is it going to fund? When are you going to make the decision about this? The selectmen, I mean.
So the selectmen have already made the decision to present it to the voters, and the voters will vote on this option at the bottom of the presidential ballot. It's written as question 3 and only for the town of Whitman.
Okay. And who is it going to benefit? If it passes, who is it going to benefit?
So if it passes, I think that it would benefit everyone in Whitman. The projects that the money would be set aside for are open space and recreation, historical preservation, and community housing. And so to get a little bit into the weeds on those, each of those categories, lumping open space and recreation as one category, has to get a minimum of 10% of the funding that's raised each year. You don't have to spend the money every year, but it has to be allocated toward those purposes.
Okay.
So there's 30%, and then the remaining 70% can go to any of the three. So most towns spend most of the money on recreation, and it's things like parks and fields, other athletic facilities, that kind of thing. But it can go to any of the three categories.
Okay, and if it isn't spent, does it go into a revolving account and stay in the town, or does it go back to the state?
So it stays with the town as the community preservation fund. Usually you'll allocate the money toward historic preservation fund, recreation fund, just so you make sure you get that 10%, and then the remaining can remain as a community preservation allocation.
So is this something that you feel that all the selectmen are on board with, or are there some people opposed to it?
Within town, there's definitely some people opposed to it. The selectmen did vote unanimously to present it at town meeting, and it passed pretty resoundingly at town meeting. But there is definitely some people who have questions about what amounts to an additional surtax.
Yeah.
The average Whitman family would only be paying an extra $40 per year. So it is a small tax that's for about a $350,000 home. But for a $300,000 home, it's about $31, and for a $600,000 home, it's about, I think, $79, but somewhere in the 70s. It's a linear scale after you take away the first $100,000 of value. So it's a lot of math. If you really want to dig into the details on that, I did a blog post a couple of weeks ago on votejustinevans.com/blog that breaks down exactly what your surtax would be under this program.
That's great. I love the transparency. I don't think I could necessarily understand the math, but I love the fact that the information's there for the public,
Yeah, there are charts there too, so you don't have to do the math yourself. You can just find your home value and go across the.
Okay. And so when you say it'll benefit everyone, it will benefit every committee in the town, or specifically, I guess my point is, like, I'm on the cultural commission myself. Does it only go, you said mostly recreation, but will it be, how do they determine which program gets what? I guess that's one, how much, you know?
Oh, so at least 10% of the allocation has to go to historical preservation. 10% has to go to community housing, and 10% has to go to either open space or recreation. And the remaining gets split up among that. For committees and towns, so when this fund is set up, we need to create a community preservation committee to manage it.
Okay.
And the CPA website actually lists that you need at least 5 members, one from the Conservation Commission, one from the Planning Board, one from the Historical Commission, one from the Housing Authority, and one from the Recreation Commission. And the town can opt to put other at-large members or other appointed members on that committee as well to manage the fund.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yep. And actually, so the practicality there would be that Community Preservation Committee would recommend articles to town meeting to spend money set aside in the Community Preservation Fund.
Okay, so it wouldn't go through the finance committee, it would go specifically through their committee?
It would probably get a recommendation from the finance committee, and if
Okay.
it were a capital project, so just to use some examples to make this a little easier and less abstract, a couple of years ago, Easton decided to remodel a lot of the outside of their town hall as a historical building using some of this money. So if a project like that were to come to Whitman, our town hall is also a historical building. That project would go through the Building Facilities and Capital Expenditure Committee after being proposed by the Community Preservation Committee. It would get a recommendation there. It would likely get a recommendation from the Finance Committee as well. And then it would go to town meeting to be voted and appropriated.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. So is there anything else you want to tell us about the CPA?
So for the CPA, yeah, at least some of the things that I've been looking at doing with this, or at least the biggest benefit to joining the CPA right now is that we are already spending a lot of money on these kind of projects. A couple of years ago, we resurfaced the track at the high school. We redo our parks and fields all the time. Whitman Town Park is 11 acres, but it takes money to maintain that. We've got a number of historical buildings and a historical downtown. And our housing authority has, I believe it was a 5-year wait the last time I talked to somebody who had applied to get in there. So there are needs in all of these areas. Open space, we've got I think it's a 17-acre former Girl Scout camp on the edge of town that just sits there. That could be an excellent use of open space money. So there's a lot of things here that would be an immediate benefit. But for the money that we've already been spending, the state could be matching some of that money. So although it would take, about $40 for the average family every year, if the state's coming in matching 20% of that, there is a savings to the town, and then the money could, money that would normally be spent out of free cash could go to other needs that we have every year.
Okay, if presuming that our town meeting will be in May, right?
Assuming that we're able to meet in person again by May, yes.
That's true, yeah. It'll be in May. And presuming it passes then, when will these funds be available?
So we won't start collecting money for this fund if it passes on the November ballot until July 1st of next year. So it won't be until the next fiscal year that we start collecting this money. And then money could be appropriated the following May. So May of 2022 is the first time the Community Preservation Committee could start requesting warrant articles at town meeting.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. I think you cleared that up for a lot of people, including me. Do you want to move on to our second topic?
Sure, that works for me.
I've also heard a lot about, I think everybody has, and I don't really understand completely. It's called ranked voting. One thing, does that apply, or we can explain it, ranked voting is changing what for the voters? Yeah.
Yeah, so it changes the really how the ballot is written and how you vote. It's a pretty fundamental change to how we elect our elected officials.
Mm-hmm. Now, I was wondering, is this specifically for Massachusetts or is this nationwide?
So this would be specifically for Massachusetts. Maine already uses this for their statewide elections. A couple of cities around the country have already implemented it for municipal elections.
Mm-hmm.
And Australia and Ireland, just as an example, have been doing this for over 100 years. Ireland, I think it's like 98, but Australia over 100.
Wow. Okay. I tried to understand it. Can you explain it? It involves voting for your favorite as number one, for your second favorite. Would you number them number one, number two, number three? How would you show that you preferred one in the first place?
So at least the way that Maine prints it out, which is probably the closest model to what we'd be using, is it lists all of the candidates, as we normally see it, one after the other. And then next to it, there's a line of bubbles that says first choice. And next to that, a line of bubbles that says second choice. And then third choice, and one for every candidate listed. So yeah, that's how the actual voting would work. Is you go in, you say this, candidate B is my first choice, candidate C is my second choice, and A is my third choice.
Okay, now here's the part that gets complicated for me. When everyone has voted for, okay, their first, second, and third, this is per office, right? You vote
Yes.
per office. You collect all the number one votes for the candidate who gets the most votes, or it has to be more than 50%, right?
So the idea behind ranked choice voting is that any winner has to have at least 50% support.
Okay.
So in most elections, if there's only two candidates running, you're going to have a winner right away. Or if one of the candidates immediately gets over 50%, it's going to end right there. But it gets trickier. Yeah, it gets trickier when someone has less than 50%.
Right. So if they have less than 50%, then is it the person with the majority stays in the number one position and then the others are removed completely, or do they move down to two?
So what happens if that happens, the candidate with the least votes gets taken away, and everybody who voted for that candidate, their second choice applies. And so you'll take away the bottom candidate, and everyone who marked a second choice who had voted for that candidate, those move to the other candidates.
This is just something I was thinking of. Is this similar to the delegate system, in that they get more support? I don't know how to say it, but they get a certain amount of support for being the number one candidate, but other people get support too. I don't know if that makes sense.
So it's a little more similar to if you watch the Iowa caucus for presidential elections.
Yeah.
When you see everybody gathering in corners of the room and then one candidate doesn't have 15% of the votes, all those people leave and move to another candidate.
Okay.
So this is the same idea, but on paper.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then actually somebody could be one of the candidates. And what happens if you drop down to second? How can anybody win? I guess my point is, once they required people who got less than the number one percentage to drop down to second, then don't they know who the winner is? Or so does it matter that there's a second and third place is what I'm saying. Yeah.
So in the perfect scenario where nobody has a majority of the vote until there are only two candidates left, somebody will, unless it's a perfect tie, somebody has to have more than 50% of the votes.
Okay.
So you'll continue dropping other candidates. If there are 5 people running, you'll continue dropping them until somebody has 50% plus one.
And this is as the votes are being counted, right? It's not that people get to vote more than once.
No,
right?
So you vote once, it's tabulated. Where it gets tricky here, I'll use the example of what Maine did in 2018. So they had a congressional race where the lead vote getter had like 46%. The person behind him had 45%, and then there were 2 independent candidates that had single-digit percentages. So they didn't have a winner on election night. What the state of Maine had to do was go to every town, collect all of the ballots, and tabulate it centrally for just that one race. And because you won't know in any individual town or any individual county if statewide that candidate has 50% of the votes. And so it added about a week to the election. And at least in that case, the person who would come in with about 2,000 fewer votes ended up with 3,000 more at the end.
Wow.
Based on the independent candidate's second choice preferences.
Do you see, it seems kind of confusing from a voter's point of view. Who is it advantageous for?
So the benefits that I see here is that it should help reduce polarization and negative campaigning. So if somebody is always trying to, if you can't really win an election by demonizing the other guy because you need their votes if they aren't the number one or number two candidates.
Yes.
So it really should help. It should help candidates that aren't just attacking other candidates. I think in Massachusetts specifically, it would help more, middle of the road candidates, the Stephen Lynches and Charlie Bakers, because they appeal to a wider variety of people, although they may not win races that have 3 or 4 people running, because, if you only need 30 or 40% of the vote to win, it may not benefit those more moderate, middle of the road candidates. But if you need to get 50% plus one, people may fall to that as their second choice or third choice.
Do you think we'll have a large turnout this year? I know I probably asked this the last time I talked to you, but as a result of the mail-in voting, do you think we're bound to have more participation?
So I think just the mail-in voting aside, Whitman always has a large turnout during presidential elections. I think this year we're going to see over 80 or 85%. I think we're going to have near record turnout.
Wow.
In part because of the mail-in voting, we've got 2 weeks of in-person early voting starting October 17th, that Saturday. And then election day, we're going to see a lot of people come out too.
Okay. And how do you think these ballot questions will do? How about the first one on CPA? Do you think we'll probably?
So I don't know. I am advocating for CPA on my own. I've posted a number of articles, a number of blog posts, a number of things on Facebook, and I'll be writing a letter to the Whitman-Hanson Express. Hopefully it'll be posted next week. But I'm doing my best to try and get CPA passed because I think it would be a huge benefit to the town. All the towns around us, Abington, Weymouth, Rockland, Hanson loves it. They've been using it to redo large parts of Camp Kewanee. They redid the docks. The recreation area at the high school near the senior parking lot was paid for by CPA money.
Oh, good.
So even Whitman is starting to benefit from some of Hanson's CPA funds.
Okay,
I hope that passes because I think it would open up a lot of good things for the town.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add my own opinion. If they're going to improve public spaces, I hope they use more green technology. If they're going to put lights in, I hope they use solar lights and things like that. Think of that as they're improving public spaces. So
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, or at least LEDs. I know that Whitman has recently redone all of our streetlights with LEDs, but I believe that over in Abington they added lights over the pickleball courts using CPA money as a recreational expense.
Okay, and what about ranked voting? I don't know how I should vote on that one because it's so confusing to me. Okay.
So I am supporting ranked voting because I think that it will help either third parties or more moderate candidates see more success in Massachusetts. And you should see, we've got a very diverse electorate, but it's diverse from pole to pole, from end to end. We span the whole spectrum here. I think that we'll get more stuff done if people learn to compromise. And I think that can start by not demonizing your opponent all the way through.
Yes, it's strange when that happens because it's even stranger when they do support each other in the end because they said such horrible things and now they're all past that. They seem so committed to saying that that person was terrible, and now it's getting closer to the election and they've decided that they like each other after all. So it's
so I do think CPA will pass, or I think that the ranked choice voting will pass, but I think that because of each of the last 2 primary cycles for Congress, we've had elections decided by less than 25% of the vote. The winner has had less than 25% in the primary, and then it's the Democratic primary that candidate. In 2018, Congresswoman Lori Trahan went on to win. And this year, Jake Auchincloss is the runaway favorite to replace Joe Kennedy's seat. And he had like 23 or 4% of the vote in the primary. So I think that people will look at that and think, is this really how the majority of members of this district voted? Or were they picking a party, similar candidates somewhere else in the spectrum? And then just because you're able to piece together one corner, you end up being the nominee and on to Congress.
Yeah, or even in the election itself, you might only get, if there are several candidates, you might end up getting a small percentage, depending on how many people voted, if I'm right. So in some cases, it's actually as if it wasn't a majority that won. It was actually of the populace, of the whole electorate.
Right.
It was actually a small percentage of the majority that won, or not even the majority at all that elected them.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick apart my own race for selectmen, I think we had about 10% turnout in that election. And I won a majority. I was over 50%, but of 10% of the town that actually showed up to vote.
Yeah, that's always interesting. So I don't know, we covered a lot. I'm glad you clarified this stuff for us. Is there anything else you want to talk to us about today?
Just to remind everybody to get out and vote. You know, we've got a presidential election that ends on November 3rd. It has started already. Ballots are already out.
Wow.
If you're voting by mail, there's a drop box next to town hall. You can fill it out and leave it right there. It's maybe 100 yards from the post office, so it's not that different than sticking it in the mail next door. If you're voting in person early, starting October 17th, that Saturday, polls will be open to vote early, and then on November 3rd, the town hall will be open all day.
Okay, those things are important to know. And thank you so much for being with us today. It's been great and enlightening. And I hope to see you again here soon.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And to everybody who viewed this today, Whitman Enhancement, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Take care.